Hell yeah, dude.
Back in what, like 2003?
Sick, like
Let alone if you
MP3
waited.
players.
Yeah, if you waited a year, they would have gone down half in price.
Oh yeah.
This is my iPad Nano.
They like hand out.
Screen's crushed.
It has 8 gigabytes. I could
Yeah,
hold 24
But I've got like
songs.
the whole discography of Def Leppard on here, so that's sick. Linkin Park.
You're listening to the Bent Motorsports Podcast with the owner of Bent Motorsports, David Beckett, and his crew, Jacob Hunsinger, James Hernandez, and Jake Russo. Listen in as the guys discuss all things motorsports, including tech tips and current shop projects.
Yeah, you know what? Let's get into it, right, guys? It's been how many months since
1
we did a
week.
podcast? August?
5, right?
It's been since August 17th we talked about Holcomb Creek. So killing it on doing a podcast a week. Really nailing it.
Yeah,
Needed a hiatus.
Yeah, we needed a hiatus. We could blame it on COVID, but let's be honest, that's not what it was because we
Sometimes
worked
you-
every day.
Sometimes you just need to like venture out, maybe go into the shop, go on vacation on the weekend.
Yeah.
You come back, you get a fresh mind. That's why we're here now.
Yeah.
Were we supposed to be on vacation that whole time?
No, not at all.
Russo was apparently on vacation that whole
Gotta pay
time in his
bills,
brain.
Dude, gotta pay bills.
So what are we going to talk about? Let's talk about our most recent antics we had here, and that was with Jake Russo and his Jeep engine exploding on the freeway.
You can't tell them that part already.
What? No, was that the giveaway? Did I give it
backspace,
away?
backspace.
Yeah,
Backspace.
backspace set. Okay, so here's the dealio. I put up the Jeep for sale.
Put up the
and-
Jeep. This is his 2001 TJ two-door
Mhm.
anniversary
Special
edition.
edition.
I don't know if you know this or
Yeah,
not, but
60
they
years
only
of
made a
Jeep.
few of those,
Yeah.
So
especially in black.
one of 1,800 actually.
Yeah,
So
he's a big
kind
deal.
of a big deal.
Everybody.
Like they're fetching top dollar these days.
Top
but I
dollar.
only had one person that was interested. So
Chrome grill.
this one person that was interested wanted to trade me for a truck. So he came up, he looked at the Jeep. So
What kind of truck was it?
Hold on.
Okay.
So give us some good
It was-
details.
No. Yeah, keep
I-
going.
We're still in the works right now. The guy went out of town for Christmas and New Year's and stuff like that. So I'm waiting to see when he comes back to figure out the details of it. But it's a 96 K2500 extended cab long bed with a
God.
6.5.
God.
The 6.5.
So the complete
liter,
opposite of what you have right now.
for sure. I went from like the shortest wheelbase possible to like the land yacht. I've actually, what were they called? Cowboy Cadillacs,
Land yacht.
Land yacht. So it's got the 6.5 Detroit turbo diesel. It has a MV 4500 manual 5-speed, which is the same one that they hooked up to the 6BTs back in whatever gen Dodge Cummins that was. And then it has a MP 241C transfer case, which is, I think, the same size casings that they put in the Rubicon, but different variant of it. So I don't know. To me, like, it's got some cool bones to it, and I don't know if I'm going to make it into a wheeler, if I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, so me and Jake planned, I actually forced him to go down and look at it with me because if I went down there by myself, I'd get all googly-eyed and just drop the hammer on it right away. So I had to have somebody there to mellow me
Yeah,
out.
he'd just like pop his top over that NP241 and
Yeah.
the CBABCs and the
Uh-huh.
this. It's so you're telling me it had a transmission?
Yeah, it had a
Wow,
transmission.
amazing.
Uh-huh. So me and Jake go down there. Had probably one of the best breakfast burritos I've had in my life.
Oh, well, sidebar, where was that?
No.
No?
Yeah, dude. It's
Secret.
It's the Great White
No.
Buffalo. I can't tell anybody
It's
about
called
it.
Penelope's.
Penelope's.
It's
It was
bomb.
down in, El Cajon or Santee?
Penelope's.
Yeah.
Pretty close to SCSU, I think.
All right.
So anyway, we go down there and look at it. Everything was good. Trying to make a deal work with this guy. And so on the way,
To trade your perfectly good daily driver wheeler Jeep
is it that good?
for
Riddle me this, Batman. Is it
no.
that good?
I mean, it's fine. That's just my
well,
question.
now it's better.
Continue.
So we're on our way back to the freeway, which is like all of 2 minutes from this guy's house to the freeway. And right when we're about to get on the freeway, it started making this like ticking sound, which sounded like it was something like a wire or something hitting the firewall, like it was very subtle. And so it just kept ticking. And we get on the freeway, start cruising down the freeway, a couple minutes. Both of us are kind of looking at each other, just, yeah, it's a weird sound, isn't it? Yeah, it's a weird sound. It kind of changes with the throttle, you know? Like, yeah, it's weird. Keep driving. A couple minutes later, dude, that's a weird sound. Like, I can't figure out what it is, you know? So we just keep driving. And all of a sudden, you just hear the thing go. It just sounded like fucking marbles in a trash can, you know? And it was just like, oh, that wasn't good. So we pulled off to the side. There's like oily smoke coming out everywhere, so we couldn't really see anything. And then kind of like the smoke settled. We're just sitting on the side of the freeway. Smoke settled, and you could just look down like between the intake manifold and the exhaust header just perfectly enough to see the bottom of the oil pan. And I think that's when we realized that there was just a giant hole in the side of the block where a piston had evacuated.
Tired of this shit.
Yeah, so it gave up. Called AAA, got that all figured out. Kevin actually came down to the rescue and picked us up because due to COVID, you cannot go in the tow truck with the guys. They will take you to the nearest exit and drop you there for you to get a ride, like so you can get off the freeway.
So
But
so
they
wait a
won't
minute.
do
So
anything.
so with COVID, you're not allowed to ride in a tow truck with a guy, but you can ride in an Uber or a cab with somebody.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, makes sense. I'm just writing down some notes, taking some notes,
Precisely. So anyway, it gets towed back to the shop,
adding stuff up.
and that was Saturday. I didn't want to even touch it because I was just fed up with it. And then Sunday morning I cracked into it, and I think by Monday morning we had it pulled out completely. And then it literally looked like the thing threw up in the shop because there was just parts everywhere. And then I ended up posting on one of the local, I think it was like SoCal Jeeps on Facebook or something like that, SoCal TJs. And one of the guys, I posted on there, anybody have a 4-liter engine for sale? I need one for my 2001. So this guy reaches out and he goes, yeah, give me a call. I got several of them. So I call him up, and basically he had a couple different variants of them, you know, all different years and stuff like that. And so me and Kevin ended up loading up his Ford and drove all the way up to Lancaster.
Yep.
So, which was like 3.5 hours at least. Cruised all the way up there. The guy was super cool. He actually had Dirt Every Day. Fred and Dave did an episode there where they built a Jeep from the junkyard and drove it all the way back from Lancaster to San Luis Obispo.
I remember that episode.
Yeah.
What's the name of this guy's? It's basically like a Jeep wrecking yard, essentially, right?
Yeah, dude, and he was super cool. So he had probably, I don't know, 40 Jeep carcasses laying around his property. Had probably 3 big containers that he had engines and flywheels and just parts galore inside of. He had a big shop. He had kind of like his personal builds in there as well as other builds that he was working on.
Super cool stuff in there.
Yeah, some really cool stuff. So that his company was called Sergeant Jeep. So if any of you guys need anything, it was a pleasure to go up there and hang out. We kind of shot the shit for a while.
His name's Tommy.
It is my
Tommy.
pleasure to serve you.
So much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He did serve us.
Yeah.
Not
he
only a
did.
Jeep engine and a clutch and flywheel, but he was also in the military and does stuff with aviation wiring now. So he was a very smart, down-to-earth dude,
Yeah.
for sure.
And from his house, you could actually see Willow Springs Raceway, which was cool. I wish there was stuff going on there because we for sure would have stopped and checked that out for a minute.
Isn't that the fastest raceway in the West?
Is it?
I think is that
that's-
their slogan?
Well, that's Buttonwillow.
I think that's Buttonwillow. But either way, it was cool because like you see videos of Willow Springs, right? But you don't see.
I already got you, buddy.
what.
I'm already mixing
I
you
know.
up here.
I know.
You're like Button Springs.
Button
Get-
Springs Willows.
uh,
But you can't see like the actual elevation of that place, and there's a lot of elevation change because it's right pitched up along this like big mountainous area, right? So it's kind of cool to see it. We didn't see it super up close, but it was cool to see it from afar. You know, you can kind of get in a grasp of how rad that track is, really.
That's wicked.
So anyway, me and Kevin loaded up. We got an engine. We got a new clutch. We also I actually tripped over a sway bar with the electronic disconnect for one of our buddies. So I picked that up for Todd.
It was a good haul.
His wife was super stoked with me.
What? What?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Stoked
She
as in
came up to
not.
me- She came up to me the other day. She goes, Jake, I'm so happy you found that for Todd. God, what would he have done without that? Oh my God. And I was like, hey, I'm just doing my job, you know, job security. So yeah, we ended up driving back. Got back to the shop I think at like 6:30 or 7, and then let's see, we had a job that took up Saturday, which was fine, I guess.
Ken. Okay.
And then
next.
Sunday I started putting the engine in, and actually Saturday evening, David, Kevin, and myself and Ken, I guess he helped too. We ended up getting the engine mounted to the trans, got it on its motor mounts, all self-sufficient and holding itself up. So all I had to do on Sunday was hook up everything. And so Monday morning it drove out of the shop. It sounds, I think, way better. I realized that there was no exhaust gaskets on it like at all before. So there was definitely some things that needed to be changed out. But yeah, it was good. The engine worked out really good. I put a new clutch in it. That feels great. So
So
now
it was,
here we are.
essentially it was a 1 week turnaround exactly, right?
It was just about 1 week of a turnaround.
And now you have a perfectly good motor in it, and you're still gonna swap it to a guy for a POS 96 Chevy.
I think so. What do you drive, James?
I drive a bitchin' 99 Chevy. Way different.
Gotcha. Big difference there.
Yeah, it's mint. It's what we call mint.
Super mint.
Mint condition, yeah.
Mint.
I was actually just
Unmolested.
looking at it outside. It's super clean.
Yeah,
I
it's-
really
Did you guys
dig
see
it.
the other one
I
that's
gave
for
it a-
sale over at the auction yard?
No.
There's
Is it mint?
Is it
well, it has right in the middle of the roof the amber like Caltrans lights
Oh man, I love
on the roof, and it's right in front of the auction house for sale out front with a for sale sign on it.
That's gonna
Should snag that.
be, yeah.
I didn't even know there was an auction house over here.
Yeah.
it's
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Every Friday.
sleazy.
I bought a 1996 BMW 328 IS from it, and I drove
Yeah.
it a lot. And it was fun.
Whatever happened to that thing?
I sold it for exactly the amount of money I put into it.
Sick.
$1,100.
Nice.
That's a win. That's not a loss.
No, that is actually very much a win. That might have been a little bit more, but when you factor in my time, which
Nobody does.
nope, we don't do that around here.
Why would we do that?
It takes away all the dealiness that we get.
Yeah, right. You feel it's so much more like satisfying when you're like, yeah, dude, I made out like a bandit on that thing. Like, don't count the 40 hours I had in
The
last
whole
week,
week.
but it's, you know,
To get it running. All the parts you had to buy out.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
we have to factor in parts, everybody. Okay. You don't factor in
So Russo, you're gonna get rid of the Jeep and you're gonna buy this Chevy. So is the goal to do something with the Chevy so you can go off roading with us? Because that's kind of what we do.
I don't know yet.
Didn't you
I don't
buy
know.
the Jeep in the first place because you really wanted to go off roading with everybody?
Yeah, and I love it.
And then now you're not. You know you can't do
So,
that in that truck, right?
Here's the other thing that I was kind of debating on too, right? I was 5 seconds away from building the Jeep and spending a lot of money on it. And then I started thinking about it, and I really realized that with how small it was, I really wanted an LJ, and I really wanted to build an LJ instead.
Yeah.
What the fuck does that have to do with anything?
What, with the truck? Because I wanted to get an LJ because they were bigger, they're going to be worth more no matter what. Like every way you look at it, it's a better vehicle in my opinion at least.
You're correct.
I think you're kind of a sadist. I think you're kind of also insatiable. And I think you constantly need to be giving yourself problems that your Jeep was just running too good and having too little problems that didn't
Yeah.
give you anything to do in your spare time.
Exactly.
And you didn't have any money pits around because your BMW is mostly built now. So, I mean, what
guess
are
you
you going to
could
just
say that.
start dumping money? Oh, nope. And you bought a mountain bike,
I did.
but then that thing runs fine. So
Yeah.
there's no problems there.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just one of those things. Like I really wanted to not spend the money on this TJ and build something like an LJ that I was going to be way more stoked on in the end. Something that's going to be worth more
Until
in
it
the end.
runs good and doesn't give you any problems for a while, and then
I
you'll
guess so.
decide that
I'm
something
an
else
idiot.
needs.
I'm an idiot.
No,
So
I think
let's
we're
just
all
stop it
guilty
there.
of that.
Who
No,
else is
here.
guilty?
So his first plan was
I just
Okay.
wanted you to admit it so that we could all be on the same page. Because I don't unsubscribe from that philosophy at all. But at least I don't try to sit over here and go, I think it'd just be a better idea to sell my perfectly good car and build a race car. Because it's like it makes more sense. No, I'm like, no, I'm just bored and I like spending
I
money.
think
that
that's
can
what
buy
we all do anyway.
exactly.
I'm getting out of a monthly payment.
Well, actually, that's pretty good.
Not if you get
Yeah.
an LJ also.
So
Well,
that
no,
was
that's what he-
that was part of the thing was like if I got an LJ, I would have added to the monthly payment. So this way I'm going backwards obviously, but I'm also not having a monthly payment.
This podcast should be titled "A Case Study in How Men Justify Stupid Shit."
Yeah, for sure.
Well, no, because the case study would have a conclusion. I don't think we're going to find the
There's
The
answer.
conclusion is we're right.
Yeah.
The conclusion is just, it
We
just
have
says
problems.
answer, men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
That's the answer.
Jeep guy. Hashtag Jeep thing.
Jeep
No,
life.
see,
Jeep stuff.
Jake wanted an LJ, so he's like, wait, I'm not going to dump all this money into this Jeep here. I'm going to save this money, flip this, get an LJ, dump all the money into the LJ, because then in the end I'll have what I want. But then this shiny object over here, which was really just rust,
I love
was this
shiny.
Chevy, and then he got distracted by that Chevy, so
Rust
now we're
does
going down
glisten.
that.
The Chevy is really nice, though. I've obviously only seen it in pictures, but it's pretty fucking rad.
And you know me, guys. I encourage all things.
David does.
David will
It's actually
not
the
tell you
worst.
no.
Yeah, you'll come to me and say, what do you think about this? I need your honest opinion. And I'll go, you should for sure buy that.
Yeah.
Sell your perfectly good running Jeep and buy that.
His
100%.
honesty is so key.
But the thing is I'm not lying to you. I'm honest. I want you to buy it.
That's why I said your
I
honesty
mean,
is
and
key.
It's neutral chaos. It's not his. He doesn't have to do anything about it. He just wants
If you
to
want
watch it
somebody to
happen.
talk you out of it, go talk to your girlfriend or your wife.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk you out of it.
No
That's
way,
for sure.
baby.
Yeah.
No way.
James, what's going on in your life?
All right.
We haven't seen you for a while. I mean, we see James a lot, but he has his own life where you don't have a life. James has a life, so we'd like to hear about his life.
I really don't. But I got a job at a motorcycle warehouse for a while, and I saved up all my money, and I stopped working there because it was not my jam.
It was not for you.
Yeah, warehouses are hard. Assembly lines are hard. You know what? I think we've all celebrated Mr. Ford a little bit too much. I think maybe
Yeah.
he was a D-bag and that the assembly line sucks.
Well,
Modern manufacturing might disagree with me, but I don't know. Maybe you go work on an assembly line for 6 months and you tell me if you like assembly lines or not.
What did
I
you
think-
do there?
I rest my case.
I think there's a lot of people out there, though, that the assembly line is exactly what they want, right?
Just
Yeah, they're the
mindless.
people who own the companies.
No.
And
Yeah,
if
that-
I owned a
You gotta-
company, I too would love to have an assembly
You got a
line.
point
Listen.
just
I think
watching
it's-
things get done and just sitting there like, yep.
Oh,
there's another
man.
one, there's another
Oh,
one.
my God, it
there's a
keeps
paycheck,
happening.
There's
Keeps
a
happening.
paycheck.
Not
Yeah.
everybody can have your level of ambition or your ability to sleep in past your alarm.
I
So,
mean, I
I
could.
mean, you want to work on an assembly line, you got to be up at like 4 in the morning, right?
I had to be up at 6.
Yeah, that's the part you didn't like. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it sucked. I don't like it.
Yeah. he does
5 more
not.
minutes, Dad.
So you did the same thing every day?
Yeah, it sucked.
What did you do there?
I did condition reports on motorcycles, and I just can't be. You had to like just be in the same spot all day, doing the same thing all day.
Yep, no fucking
I'd
thanks.
get tired of that real
Yeah.
quick.
Dude, I don't even like sleeping in my fucking bed because you only have one pillow and like 6 square feet to sleep
You
on.
need 7 pillows.
You don't like your bed?
It's like every
No, I
woman.
don't
That's how
actually.
it-
I don't
that's
sleep well
weird.
anyway. But
I love my bed. I walk in my room and I smile real big. I go, oh God, there it is.
He starts rubbing his tummy.
There's my bed. I'm coming for you.
So that was just a segue here. I bought a motorcycle, a dirt bike this year.
Yeah, buddy.
I've been wanting to buy a dirt bike since I was 8 years old, and 8 years old didn't have any money though because he couldn't legally work, which is, we need to do something about child labor laws in this country because 8-year-olds the world over want dirt bikes and they're not allowed to get jobs for them. What's up with that?
You got to get a paper route.
Also,
So,
you're
yeah,
still
I was-
working and not getting paid.
that actually has me wondering now because when I was little in the borough on the East Coast, I used to like push around my lawnmower and weed whacker and people paid me. So was that
That's what I did.
technically illegal?
No,
Like-
it was your own business. You weren't employing yourself. Employing you would have been illegal.
But I feel like a lot of things
Oh,
back
so-
then were not illegal. I think everything now is illegal.
No, but you can have my kid who's, say my kid's 9 years old. They can have a business. You can start a business.
Yeah.
He's got a bank account.
I thought you had to be 18.
I don't know, man.
mean,
Look,
probably
somebody out
legally.
there's probably going, look, Dave, you can't do that. But both my kids owned, all right, they were illegal businesses, but they were businesses.
Yeah, what was it? I think I was 14 in Philly when I was allowed to be on legal payroll, and I couldn't work more than 2.5 hours a day after school, and no more than 5 hours on the weekend.
Yeah, but that's for working for somebody.
Under
That's-
18?
Yes.
Yeah, I had some weird.
Under 16.
Oh, under 16.
Under 16,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, because I was gonna say I was a Christmas free delivery guy, and I was.
David
working, like,
just touched
under-
my fucking lip.
Yeah, did he?
while
Do it
while
again.
moving my
Do it again.
microphone.
Well, Kevin turns his head when he talks, and it's like misses the microphone completely. We had a whole conversation about this
Yeah.
before the podcast, and he's fucking it up all the way. Noob.
So I bought a dirt bike.
That's
So
cool.
you bought a dirt bike. No, but did you
Yeah, I
get
was kind of telling a story here, but
derailed?
Jeez. No, yeah. First dirt bike, $600, didn't run, but I was smart enough to, of course. You got to grab your buddy when you go and look at these things. It's just part of it.
It was a great
It's part of
deal.
it. Yeah, I grabbed Jake, and I mean, we looked at it, and it was actually an incredibly clean motorcycle. And the guy was just the biggest chiller I've ever met.
Nice guy.
Yeah, and Jake was like, "If you don't buy it, I'm gonna buy it." And I
Did
was
you buy
just
it in
like,
California?
That's how good of a deal
Yeah.
it was.
Bought it right here. It was literally like 8 miles from my house, probably.
Oh wow.
And I caught it like 16 minutes after it was posted.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
the
shit.
guy said by the time I got there, he had like 30 like messages.
They were blowing him up.
Oh, wow.
The
Yeah,
whole time we were
people
there.
were like trying to pry it from his hands while I was trying to hand him the money, and I was $50 short. And I was like, sorry, the ATM only let me pull out this much money. And he was like, I don't care, dude. Like, here you go. Here's the bike.
Super chiller.
and then delivered it for us.
Oh yeah,
No
he even
shit.
drove it back over
Oh, that's
here in
right.
his truck
Yeah.
to Bent because I had my truck, and I was like, well, maybe I can lay it on its side or something. And he's like, dude, no, I'll direct drive it over there. So really rad guy. So thus begins the saga. It did not run. He said it was fouling plugs, and I looked up a bunch of stuff, and it could have been the gasket between your freaking clutch and your all kinds of bottom end craziness, right? And I was just like, this is no. I changed the spark plug. I got new gas in it. I cleaned the carb. Oh, I got some nice reeds for it because it's a 2-stroke. Please,
That's our guard dog.
Sorry.
Don't nobody worry.
please saw something.
Crazy in 2020.
And yeah, and it runs perfectly. It literally like ran. So I took it out to the track one day. Never been to a track before. That scared the crap out of me. But I
so
needed.
intimidating.
Oh yeah,
They really are,
I
man.
needed to test it, and I was like, I don't want to go out to the desert and then have it break in the desert and then be in the desert. I was like, if I'm at a track, I just will like push it like a couple hundred yards back to my truck, and I'm like, okay, cool.
Track's
Again-
a great way to learn how to ride a dirt bike, honestly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I want to go back. It was so much fun. And yeah, and then I went out with David and the family, and apparently, so weird that all this time, everybody who's owned a truck and everything, they go out to the desert, they go out on trails, and it's so much fun. And I don't own trucks, so I've always been filming and stuff. And then when I get something fun to go out on, everybody just stopped going to have fun on the trails in the desert. It's just odd.
You were the only. I mean, I go all the time. I'm always there.
Haven't seen Russo or Jake out on the trails.
I have nothing to go to the trails on right now. Okay. My stuff is.
I'll be joining
But-
you
I'm
soon.
in between.
But since you brought that up,
Yes.
what do you
Yes.
what do you have?
Yes.
What?
Did you find something to go to the desert with us?
Yes, I found an Explorer that I'm going to solid axle swap.
Oh my god!
And-
I'm gonna get you. You'll slip up.
yeah, I will.
I can see him sweating.
I don't sweat.
He doesn't sweat.
He's just hydrated.
He just gets moist.
I glisten.
This is the meat of this podcast. Meat. If we haven't knocked everybody else
Aw,
off
beef.
by this time, beef.
Oh, beef.
This podcast is about the things that you need to know if you want to solid axle swap a rig.
That's true. So that's what we should really talk about. So we've mentioned in the past Jake's Explorer and that he's going to solid axle swap it. Well, now he's
Actually gonna do it.
actually involved in it and has accumulated parts and is getting ready to start cutting away. So I don't know if you want to go into some of the if you can think of anything that you want to talk about that maybe you didn't anticipate that was a surprise, or any hurdles you had to get over, or things that people need to think about when they're standing there staring at their vehicle thinking, I'm going to solid axle swap this. What are some things that they need to really truly consider?
So the first thing that I seem to run into and try to put a lot of effort into was I'm trying to build this thing to where I don't really have to touch it for a while. I'm really tired of working on my mediocre vehicles, and I've never had a vehicle that was like fully built. So this will be as close to that as possible, and I'm just tired of working on my stuff. I want to use it. So I tried to overbuild. In the process of trying to overbuild it as best as I can. And the first thing that I wanted to overbuild was the steering. I wasn't going to do hydraulic assist because maybe if somebody else could find the math to make it more price friendly, but for me it just was not. It was pricey to buy a Ram and do all that stuff. So and get a ported box. I think the ported box was another $300, and I was trying to go off of funds from selling that.
What's a ported box?
So the ports on the side of the steering, they drill ports into the steering box to power an auxiliary hydraulic ram to assist like larger tire diameters going in the rocks.
I mean, this is all very important because like I'm Joe Schmo trailer, and I want to solid axle swap my IFS rig. I mean, I even right now, I want to solid axle swap my Suburban, but you know, hydro steer is expensive.
Yeah.
And it's pretty involved. Like,
yeah,
it's not just getting some links on a pitman arm and telling it to go. You're dealing with hydraulic systems which aren't very friendly when it comes to messing up and lines and fittings and holding pressure and all these things. You're like, maybe hydro steer isn't the way you want to go. So you're saying no hydro steer, not
yeah,
this is not the way.
It was more to manage, and maybe one day I'm gonna regret it. I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out though. So I got the biggest box that I could get, which was like the PSC
Huge.
XD big bore. I didn't get the JK one. It's just a Dodge 2500, 3500, like 07 to 17 or something like that.
That's beefy.
I got a big box. Got a big old box. So the first thing getting to the point, forward-facing pitman arm, rearward-facing pitman arm was something that I was running into. Seeing the way that some of the boxes were cocked from the factory and trying to fit that into, where the radiator was, where I have space on the frame. Am I going to pick a steering gear that goes outside the frame or inside the frame? These are all just things that I've debated for months and months and months of where everything is going to lie because I don't want to cut into it. In reality, I know it's going to come down to cut everything off, all the IFS stuff, and then favor it up in there and see if it fits. But the best I could, I tried to measure it out and make sure that I wasn't going to see any interference with that. Where, unless you have parts in front of you, it's hard to measure and estimate. But I tried to just get as many measurements and dimensions as I could. So as I would see a Chevy drive by or parked in the parking lot, I'd go over and measure something like, oh shit, maybe this pitman arm will work or something.
There were so many times.
I mean, sorry.
No, good.
So if, in short, the first thing you're going to say is, oh, you want to solid axle swap your rig? Steering.
Yeah, figure out your steering.
What are you
going to
do? Because also, how prevalent's bump steer on a solid axle rig when you start actually cycling,
you got to make sure.
Plus
yeah,
inches.
definitely. I mean, you got to make sure that you have your panner bar dimensions up. If you ever follow Wheel every weekend, he's always posting up about
So
that.
much info.
All the proper geometry, how you can easily plan it out and make sure you don't have bump steer. Like
That's one of the things that people think about solid axle swaps is that they're just like, oh, it's a solid axle. It's straight. It's,
no.
there's no suspension geometry. You just throw a couple of leafs in there and bing, bang, boom, and she's good to go. Like A-arms, no, that's trigonometry or something. And you're like, no, you'll probably have to cut and turn the axle, right? Are you going to?
I'm not going to.
Oh.
There's a lot of instances.
How are you getting around that?
I'm not really gonna have a super high ride height all the time. It's not gonna be.
Gravity.
It's not gonna be much different than say a stock JK. Well, it's gonna be different than a stock JK, but I'm not making it so high up all the time that it becomes an issue. It's only gonna be out of cam. Like if I'm fully drooped out, that's when the caster's gonna be all fucked up. Where the driveline angle starts to become an issue.
And that's not when you're actually
at ride heights where it's really
moving.
an issue.
Got it.
Which when you have 12 inches or 14 inches of travel, that obviously you can't make it perfect everywhere along that range. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you can't make that perfect.
It takes a lot of math, and with radius arms, you're pretty much just agreeing to having less than agreeable suspension
which
geometry.
we need to mention that's what you chose to do on this was the radius arms.
Yeah, so I originally was going to do a 3-link, but we had the parts laying around, and at one point in time, I just decided, if I decide to go with these radius arms that we already have, I can do it sooner, less money spent, So that's what I chose, and I'm just going to deal with the characteristics. When you accelerate, you're not really you're going to see a lot of rise in the front. When you're braking, there's no anti-dive characteristics with radius arms. I'm sure somebody's a genius and has figured it out, but it's not me. So, whatever.
That's for sure.
I don't.
That's really interesting.
I'd say that's the next step up though, because as far as I'm concerned, your low buck version of a straight axle swap, right, would be You get a vehicle that it has IFS, but it has a steering box, right? That eliminates one whole thing, which like your Suburban, right? That has its own steering box.
Yeah, no,
not a rack
totally.
and pinion. So you're already eliminating that part. Obviously, you have to make sure that the geometry there is okay. You get a drop pitman arm or whatever. But like your first step, like in a low buck situation, would be buy some leaf springs, right? Like
That's the lowest.
That's about as cheap as you can get. Is
Yeah.
buy
Yeah.
some leaf springs, whether it be like a rough country leaf spring or skyjacker or whatever it is, just to get that thing under, because that's like the least amount of not fab work, because there's still some fab to that, but it's the least amount of like head scratching. You know, you're not trying to figure out all these different angles and shit like that. Like it's just wherever they land up, they're pretty much
To a
they're
degree,
landing
though,
there.
but I mean, there's no it doesn't hold that pumpkin in line with the
Well, it's not the best way to
transfer
do it,
case
but it's
by
the
any
easiest
means,
way.
it's just
Yeah.
strapped slap straight to the bottom of the spring, and the spring just pushes it down.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one of those things where you might, like, again, thinking about ride height. I'd say the second most difficult thing is your ride height.
Yeah.
Is like steering. So one, you'd say steering. Two,
Yeah.
ride height.
Right
Yeah.
height, definitely
Yeah.
finding where you want it to be, where it's gonna. Because really, what it comes down to is I'm not trying to put. This axle is 6 inches wider aside. Like my it's so much wider.
Batman.
So, and I had the dream that I wasn't gonna have to run glass, but I'm pretty sure that dream's just out the window, or else this thing's gonna be rolling dirty down the highway. So
Big old mud flaps with little
God.
trucker grills on
Just
them.
make
Terrible.
sure you leave the front fenders white.
yeah,
Yeah,
you know.
for
Oh, you
sure.
got
do
it.
like
SoCal?
San Diego.
The SoCal special?
Yeah.
SoCal livery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, slap a Rockstar sticker on that thing and go, curse out your stepdad.
Corona.
That's it. That's it.
Mhm. So figuring
Shout out
out
to
how
Matt.
much travel, where I want my travel to be at, that kind of comes into ride height. Do I want to, run the whole 70-30, 60-40, droop to full bump, yada yada yada? I
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, just
There's a
that
lot of
one
stuff to do.
sentence you just said, I'm sure, if I wanted to solid axle swap my burb, I'm like, wait, what?
That's why I'm glad that he's doing this, because there are 2 other individuals at this table right now that may potentially sass their Vicks. So
Yeah. I
Thank
think it
you.
would be sweet to
Thanks,
have a
Jake.
solid axle swap Suburban and a solid axle swap Tacoma. That would be rad.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to do my truck. I'm kind of quick and dirty though, so I might go leaf springs because I'm just kind of
That's just how James does it.
I mean,
Hell
I
yeah.
am
But do you think about it?
because
like,
I'm not
that's-
the truck's too long, the wheelbase is too wide, and the frame is not stiff enough to do anything that would prevent you from just being like, why? What am I worried about on leaf springs? Because if you buy a nice pack, if you buy a Deaver pack and put the right valve shocks on it, like you're going to ride just as smooth as
Absolutely.
anything else. Like it's gonna work.
Yeah, I think
So-
Look
that
at all
I
the
think
Fords.
that, and I know that you can get a lot of articulation with leaf springs, but I think the reason why Jake is doing what he's doing versus the leaf spring is that it's just one step better, right?
No,
It's
100%.
one step better, and he can get more articulation probably than he could with a leaf spring. Even though I know people will argue with me all day about their leaf springs getting more articulation.
I have revolver shackles. They're sick.
Yeah, it's he's like, look, I get it, dude. I get it. There's
Are they
ways.
Are they sick though?
They were neat in like 2002.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get shit for that one.
The other thing.
Yeah.
too- The other thing.
If
too
we
is-
had a mailbox, it would be filling up as we speak.
What
Yeah.
are you
not
talking
even
about?
posted yet. But the other thing you got to think about too is like, what's the other step, right? Is you're going coilover, which is probably a huge advantage getting travel, because if you were to have a regular like coil spring in there separate from a shock,
Yeah.
well, now you have to make sure that that shock length is long enough to where it's not like dropping out when you drop out to full droop.
Yeah.
And like kind of similar to the TJs do. The TJs have this long bump stop that comes down, so you kind of like get the thing to free float in there for a while if you're like drooping out one side. You know? But I don't know. I think that's where the coilover comes in plays. You don't have to worry about that. You get to throw the thing down as far as it'll possibly go with the limit of the shock length, obviously.
Yeah, a smaller package is definitely nice.
For sure.
Trying to package all the shocks is another thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there, and the Explorer already is a pretty busy engine bay with the 5-liter in it. They really kind of crammed it in there, so you got to be prepared to do a little bit of work in there and try to move some things around potentially. Because I was stupid enough to get 14-inch coilovers, and them shits are long. So,
Idiot.
but I was like, ain't nobody gonna beat me. So,
Speaking of,
Yeah.
talked to my buddy Andrew Bradley, one of my friends from up in Oregon. He looked at the John Bull video, and we were talking about it over text, and he had an interesting question that occurred to me that I didn't necessarily know very precise answers to, but I answered it to the best degree I could. I wanted to ask you guys. He was looking at Ian's truck at the John Bull video. He goes, to run dual spring coils, do you know what size shock you have to run? He's talking about length, by the way.
Yeah.
Not width. And he goes, I see they're running 14-inch coilovers, dual sprung. I was mostly curious at what size coilover you can start running duals. I'd like to build an old 4Runner and link it.
I mean,
Well, for instance, like on my Jeep, we're doing a coilover conversion right now, and I have a 12-inch stroke shock, and I have one 14-inch coil and one 12-inch coil.
There you go.
I'm not sure if there's any real rule of thumb on any of that.
I think it would just be finding a spring length, because when I was getting springs for my Explorer, I got too short of springs. I think went with a 10-inch spring. Should have been a little bit longer because maybe I just needed a heavier weight because I had to preload the shit out of it. But what it came down to was they didn't even make a spring rate high enough. Maybe that was because it was IFS, because it was
Yeah,
like
'cause-
750 pounds.
But
or
you
something.
need to take preload into consideration when you were purchasing springs, especially when you're going
Definitely.
dual rate on something like a 12-inch, 14-inch.
Right. So think of it like a dual rate, right? Like, so I've got my shock fully extended. It's a 12-inch stroke. I think it's 31 inches eye to eye. I've got a 14 and a 12 on there. That's 26 of those inches, right? So 5 inches is just, where there's no threads on the top. There's the space up to the eyelet, right? The bottom perch. So we're trying to occupy as much of the shock body as possible. So if you had a 10-inch stroke, maybe you're running two 12s, or maybe you're running a 12 and a 10. If you're running an 8-inch stroke shock or a 9-inch stroke shock, maybe you're running an 8 and a 6, or you're running 2 8s. I don't know, right? You'd have to do all the math, but they sell springs in all different
Every
shapes and size. So you can go to a dual spring as quickly as you want to,
Whenever you want.
whenever you want. It just
And the benefits therein are definitely, just
so the
Tunability.
benefits to the
huge
dual
tunability.
springs is that you basically are now having a progressive. It's a dual spring rate, right? You have a progressive. So like on a Jeep, would come with a spring in it, and from the factory, it's got small coils that are closer together, and then it gets to be bigger coils, and they're further apart, and then it gets small again, right? So that's just a dual rate spring, right? That spring is going to act differently at different points of compression. But when we're talking about a coilover with two different springs, we're keeping the same 2.5-inch diameter, 3-inch diameter all the way up, right?
yeah, it's a linear.
So what happens is while one spring is working, they're both working together, but at some point one of those springs is going to hit the little floater puck in the middle, right? And it's going to come out of play, and then only the other spring is working,
Yeah.
and that's where we get
Which
our dual
creates
springs,
a progressive
which creates a progressive feel on the road,
out
right?
of
Yeah.
two linear rate
Correct.
springs, which is better.
Yeah.
Right. And then the whole idea is also to try and weigh your vehicle so that you can get the proper spring rate, right? Because the spring's only job is to hold up the vehicle. So you have to weigh it. And we're talking about sprung weight versus unsprung weight. So unsprung weight is the weight that's not being held up by it. The axle, the brakes, the wheel, the tire, all that stuff is unsprung weight.
Yeah, not gonna run. It doesn't matter if I have a truck that weighs 5,500 pounds. If I'm running A-arms versus a straight axle, I'm gonna run different spring rates because the unsprung weights of the
Right.
suspension components underneath the springs are different.
Correct.
Yeah.
So on my Jeep, before we bought all the coils for my coilovers, we need to weigh the vehicle, subtract all of the unsprung weight, and which would be, if you want to get really technical, then you need to measure a control arm and take half of that weight off, right? I think Jake, drive shafts, is that half a weight as well?
I don't even know what all
I
the
would assume
values
so.
are.
I think it's approximately half, right? Because half of it's sprung weight, half of it's unsprung weight. I'm pretty sure it's half. Somebody can correct me. But then so when I'm weighing my Jeep, I'm weighing it with what I go wheeling. I put my welder in there, I put my cooler in there with
Yeah,
with sodas, right? You have to.
Yeah.
Do I always
Same
run
thing as
one
when you do
passenger?
dirt bike suspension, you better be fully geared up with your water
Yes.
pack on and all that stuff. And
Right. So just if you do all the things in the beginning, then you're not going to be buying a bunch of different springs trying to find the right thing. Or
Yeah.
you'll see a guy who picked wrong maybe, and he's twisted the collar down so that, he's got tons and tons and tons of preload in that thing just to try to get the body to be up higher. Well, now you're just taking away the effectiveness of those springs to work in a larger range of motion. So
Yeah.
you want to
Don't bottom out your springs.
yeah, you don't want to coil bind it. So I don't know. Just take a little time, do some measurements, borrow some scales. We used to back in the day when
Maybe that's the third one there.
well, we can do
Spring.
Yeah, springs. We can do a
Yeah.
whole thing on springs. Maybe we'll do a video on springs.
Yeah.
Good idea.
The solid
Um,
axle swaps so far is things you're not gonna see coming. The steering,
Mm-hmm.
dang it, what was the second one?
The shock packaging, like where you're gonna fit all that stuff inside the fender well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you go like leaf sprung or if you go coil sprung or you
Mhm.
go coil over.
So that's actually suspension design,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, sure.
suspension design and
yeah,
then
pick
springs.
what type of design you want for your
Yeah.
solid axle.
Which
Yeah.
all comes into the budget of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean that's true because obviously the best way to go would be what like
Cantilevers are sick, but
cantilevers
it takes
sick.
you got to be smart enough to know how to apply like whatever.
No, the best way would be like a 3-link, right?
3-link would probably be the best way.
3-link on
For the front,
coilovers,
yeah.
and you're like
You
that's
got a
with a
sweet
with a
rig.
hydro steer.
Yeah.
And that's what Ultra 4 dudes are running, and that's what you should run
You
Yeah.
got to remember too.
if you
right?
have $30,000 for your front suspension.
There's also a lot of ways to do it, right? So you have to think of how are you going to drive it. What are you actually going to go do?
You going
Um,
fast?
Yeah, are you going to go fast? You're going to go just rock crawl, or are you going to go both? You're just
Your
going to drive
towing
it to the
rig.
mall, or
You know what's
what are
funny
gonna
is
do?
these things start to multiply on each other. So it's not just like A plus B equals C. It's once you answer one question, it multiplies the variables for how you answer the other questions,
Oh, for
and those
sure.
things multiply the variables after that. And so it's really interesting because you're just like, well, no, I solved the first problem, and you're like, no, you don't understand that curtailed you in certain ways for the rest. So
Yeah.
I mean, from the ground up, you should choose your axle, and of course, right? I think
Yep.
first thing is choose what axle you're going to use,
Definitely.
because that's going to tell you what kind of knuckles you can have and what kind of steering setups are already out there for the aftermarket and all that jazz.
That's
I mean, that's
how I went. I picked the axle, then I picked the and the wheels and the offset I was gonna go because I had to kind of see
interesting.
where the package was gonna lie with the frame rails and how wide it. Because I mean, it's obviously my math sucked because that shit is wide, but you know,
Or did it suck?
I mean, I'm stoked.
Yeah,
It's just
track
the,
width,
the
baby.
rear matching it is my only issue. I have to run at least 1-inch spacers in the rear. I did the chromoly axles back there that already added an inch on each side because of the
C-clip in it,
y-
eliminator.
yeah, the C-clip eliminator kit. So we'll see. We'll see if it looks all funny looking with the narrow white rear end. So
Yeah.
There's another, I would say, unexpected expense, but say you were to do a 3-link opposed to a radius arm, right? Like if you have a 3-link, you have to get 6 Johnny joints. Pretty much. Like
that was
6
one of
Johnny
my
joints,
things.
are
Hell yeah,
and they
Which
are
pricey.
which
Fancy.
is super spendy, right? Or you get 2 Johnny joints because you have a radius arm setup where those 2 Johnny joints are going on your frame side. On the axle side, you just put Delrin bushings or poly bushings. Way cheaper than going. I would assume like
Or-
the price of all those bushings is probably the equivalent to like half of a Johnny joint.
Hell yeah,
Or
dude.
you buy a $600 custom made set of Devers with
I don't
they're
think they're
Baja.
$600 anymore.
they're not.
No,
I don't
dude,
think
they're
so.
1,200 minimum.
Oh, Deaver, what do you do? Oh, because the steel.
And yeah,
Probably.
Probably
something
because
like
of the
that.
price of steel.
America 2020.
Deaver, what are you doing to me, man? When I
Well,
was
we got
when I was
like
16.
Yeah, exactly.
Brand new set was $600, and I was
Well,
like,
you ain't
I'm gonna
16
put
anymore.
I'm gonna put Devers on the back of my pre-runner. I
Mhm.
never built. I did crash. I did blow up a Celica once though. That was
Yeah, you did. That was a great time.
What? Oh, I had one more thing on the solid axles too. It escapes me right now. It's too
Brakes?
bad. No, I mean those are important. Get the biggest effing brakes you can put on that.
What
thing.
about-
Oh, that was one thing that I ran into was
Yeah.
when you think about swapping over to the new set of brakes, master cylinder size actually does come into play, right? Because different size calipers.
Think about that because you're looking underneath the motor.
Yeah.
fella.
You're like, I'm going to put an axle underneath the motor. I don't have to look over the motor for that master cylinder.
Luckily, when you go on like Rock Auto, you look up some like the lower brand parts. There's a lot of specs on them, surprisingly. So you can find
They're
like
really good with that.
bore diameters and whatever. And the Jeep JK has the same master cylinder bore diameter as the Ford Explorer does. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that it'll work for now.
There's
That's great.
also because stroke comes into play with that too, right? Like certain
I don't know. I didn't look at that.
Yes.
a certain.
I would
Well,
imagine it's important, but I'm
yeah.
not gonna pay attention.
I don't
to
think that's as important as the actual bore though.
I guess if you can bleed your shit really
I
well.
think that if the JK has the same size bore master cylinder as the Explorer, then you'll be just fine.
I think
It's
so.
it's still
I
gonna
think
go to
so,
the
too.
floor either
It's just
way.
not going to stop
Yeah,
like a normal JK or
Yeah, you
Explorer
remember the
with a-
brakes have always sucked ass on this thing.
Here's one of the other things that I think you'll benefit from too is the aftermarket support with the JK axle, right? Like the amount of how many diffs you can get, the gearing's super easy to come by, the big brake kits that you can get, like all that stuff is super easy to get. It may be expensive, but
That was kind of the reason why I chose. I've sat and waited between the JK steering box and the big Dodge one, and kind of just hoped that I'll get one that's just not gonna break, and then I won't need spares. But with all the JK stuff, the one thing that's nice is like everybody on the trail has a JK, so hopefully I can use somebody's spare parts. I have JK knuckles, JK front brakes, JK axle.
yeah.
I'm gonna make a custom front tie rod, and then the drag link is gonna be custom as well. But I'll use a stock one just to do the sizing on it. So, I think it's gonna be.
I remember what my aside was here. I've done 3 cut and turns with David over my shoulder
Oh yeah.
to ask questions, and I still wouldn't do a cut and turn by myself at this point.
No.
No, I
There's
wouldn't,
a lot to
because
it.
there's so much to it, and there's so many ways that you can mess it up. I'm talking like if you're doing your measurements and you're setting this thing up and you bump it,
Yeah.
and it falls out of spec.
Minute.
Yeah, if you do it, you can mess it up just by welding it back together, like with everything clamped on. If you don't weld it right, and so there's just, first of all, try to avoid cut and turn altogether
Yes.
with your ride height. If that's possible and it works for you, just don't go in there and be like, well, I want heck of a ground clearance and I don't care, I'm gonna do it. Probably just don't try to do that. And secondarily, if you are gonna do it, because it is really neat. And I'm definitely not that guy who's just like, don't do it, it's too hard, you could never figure it out. No, you could totally figure it out. But like, either A, study, take notes, and have a really bulletproof step-by-step plan before you start getting into that, or grab somebody who actually knows what they're doing. And not your buddy who says, my uncle's done it a couple times and we can, no, like,
Yeah, in his garage though.
yeah. Go and find somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, you can.
Or
mess
call
things up.
David. He loves when he gets
Yeah.
called.
Come on in. If you guys come in here, I will have James do your cut and turn, but don't worry, I'll watch him.
Yeah.
So much effort. How many hammers do we break doing a cut and turn?
Oh, man.
I remember the one, like, I think it was the second one actually, where we broke like 2 hammers in one day, and then you had to buy a special hammer.
Yeah, I'm like, forget it. I'm just gonna go buy a good hammer.
And so he bought
Yeah.
the best hammer on the Snap-on truck.
We need like a big, like 20-pound sledgehammer, I think.
Yeah,
we have
I
one?
used to have one, but when it's available to use, you tend to grab it and use it more often. And I want us to have a little more finesse.
David, I am finesse with a hammer.
Like we've got a forklift now. Like seriously, people, we've never had a forklift. We have a forklift now, and I'm a little afraid that we're gonna be like, just grab the forklift. Go grab the forklift.
On everything.
Yeah,
I was like tearing apart the motorhome when
I think
you
it'll come right out.
we used the
Hell yeah.
forklift in
Oh,
some
dude.
terrible ways,
So-
tearing that thing apart.
So we're out there last week working on a motorhome. Brian's motorhome. We're putting sway bars in it.
Yeah.
And these people are walking by, just random people walking by on the street in the business park, and they said, "You're gonna tear that one apart too?" And I said, "Wait." I said, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Oh no, we just loved." Apparently, they're from the building across the way, and they could see every day. They could see a little bit more,
Oh,
a little bit
God.
more of that motorhome disappearing.
What a nightmare.
And so the guy was just laughing, like, "Oh man, that thing looks too nice to cut up. You're not gonna cut it up, are you?" And I'm like, "No, not this one."
No, we're just gonna crash a forklift in the side
So
of it.
apparently, a lot of people in the business park were very entertained with
Hey, you're welcome.
the slow.
I need to find those videos and watch them again.
I walked
Recycling.
out every
They were
day
so good.
that Jake was working on that, and I would yell at him. I'd go, "What a deal!"
What a deal.
That's the truth.
Oh my god, that
So-
was fun.
I mean, sorry. did we have 5 on?
Yeah, did we get 5
Did
things?
we get to 5 of the unexpected things that you need to know?
We got steering, suspension design, springs.
Brakes.
Oh, brakes.
And wheel and tire size.
Wheel and tire size. Yeah.
I guess that goes into picking the axle.
Yeah, that
maybe
kind
is
of.
not
I
a-
guess that's
Yeah.
that's.
I guess we
one.
kind of had more. Yeah.
We
Don't
probably
Yeah.
had more than 5 there. But
And yeah, if you wheel and tire size with some of these IFS vehicles, you got to make them longer, because I'm running into the firewall already. So 35s right now, the way I'm designing it, it won't fit 37s, so I might push it forward like 1 more inch, hoping that one day if I decided to put 37s in it,
minimal clearance.
I mean,
would fit.
the more forward you push it, the better.
I know
it
better
is.
approach angles, all that business.
How far forward do you have to push it before it comes a buggy?
I mean,
Super
at
far.
a 90 or 0 degree
Zero,
or 90.
even
whatever it
negative.
is.
Like you see some of those buggies that like the wheels literally like 3 or 4 inches in front of the front bumper.
I love it.
Hell
which is pretty cool,
yeah,
I think.
I love it.
Girl.
Jake, what have we found on my Jeep converting it to coilovers? What are some things that we didn't anticipate?
So the TJs and LJs, a lot of people go outboard shocks, right? Because where the shock mounts in the rear on the top part of it, there's only so much room to go up unless you were to like cut your floor out. So what people do is they take them out from the inside of the frame and they mount the shocks on the outside of the frame, hence the name outboarding shocks. In our case, we're going coilover. Reasoning for that, it wasn't that much more expensive for how much better it's going
That's
to be.
what we tell ourselves.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we tell
Yeah.
ourselves for sure.
Well, the main thing too is that in the
Sexy.
back, if
Yeah,
we do an
exactly.
outboard, shock, you're still now your limitation is how far that coil will stretch.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So by combining it to a coilover, it just solves the problem.
It's an engineer's dream, though. They
Oof.
love when you mount that 90 degrees right over the edge.
Oh.
They're like,
Yeah.
oh man, all my calculations are so straightforward now.
They can math it up.
But there was a lot of unexpected because it's been done 1,000 times with regular shocks, and it's probably been done hundreds of times with coilovers too.
Yeah.
A lot of people go
It's
coilovers
nothing new.
on a TJ or an LJ. But the issue that you have is so you have to notch out the frame, right? You notch out the frame, and they actually sell like integrated shock towers that also do the notching of it. So
Which is what we did, right? We didn't make our own. We just
we didn't
said,
make
forget
our
it.
own. It's way too easy to spend, a couple $100 and get yourself a kit that's like pretty set up.
We
to
got
do
the
it.
synergy one, right?
It was from Poly Performance.
Oh, Poly Performance.
Yeah, which was one of I wouldn't say one of the originators, but they make a really nice kit. The lower shock mounts are nice. They actually like protect the lower part of the shock from getting hit by a rock. They're all plated underneath. So it was a good kit. It's really nice and thick metal. So basically you notch out the frame, you put this coilover in, you have to take your measurements, right? Because basically what we did is we put the thing to full bump. We saw how much room we have under the body from where the diff would hit it, where we'd hit exhaust, where we'd hit all that stuff, right? So you go full bump, both wheels all the way up, and then you have to start flexing it. So you drop it back down, you put one wheel as far up as it can go, the other one all the way down, and then you start looking at, okay, well, where can I physically go as high as I can without rubbing on the fender? So then you get to that point. You take some measurements, figure out how far down you're going to be there. Between the frame and all that stuff. So then you take that all back down, make some measurements as to where you want the shock to mount, right? Because ideally, when you're fully articulated, you want the shock to bottom out right before you get to your fender and start rubbing on your fender. So that's the idea
No
behind
way,
it.
bro.
That's it.
I want to know when I'm bottomed out.
I mean, I guess that's, yeah, like
I'll-
little tattletales.
Yeah, the pop, 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 pop.
But
There
then,
goes the
but then
fender.
as your tires wear down, it's not going to be the same effect,
So, well, and here's the other thing too, right now,
Buy
right?
new
So,
tires.
so Jake was talking earlier about droop, and so what a lot of people who are designing their suspension are going to first decide how much droop they want to be at during ride height, right? So so we can simply measure that. To do it simply, just if your shock has a 12-inch stroke and you want to set the thing up at 50-50, then at ride height you would want 6 inches of shock shaft showing, right? That's just a quick reference on how to tell you're at 50% droop, right? Well, in my instance, I'm not going to do what everybody else does because why would we do that here? When have we ever done what everybody else does? So I basically told Jake, look, when we're designing this thing, I want you to put my vehicle at full flex and with one tire stuffed Let's measure that distance. And at that distance, I want my shock to be completely compressed, right? So that when it does drop out, then I'm getting the maximum amount of drop as possible on that axle.
Yeah.
And if that means that my ride height, if I'm riding around it, with only 3 inches of shock shaft showing at ride height, because that's the other thing, right? I don't want my Jeep really high.
Yeah.
I want my Jeep really low.
Well, especially I think with how much weight you have in that Jeep, with all the tools and everything, that you don't want it to be super high. That's
No.
like the biggest thing, right? If you had less weight and it was a little more agile, I don't think it'd be that big of a deal to go a couple more inches up. Maybe do set it up at that 50-50 rate that everyone likes. But in this case, this thing is heavy. Like, it is fully weighed down.
And I know people have told me, take some shit out of your Jeep. Why do you, whatever. I do me. You do you. This is what I want. I want my Jeep to be low center of gravity. I want way more dropout than I have. I want way more, down travel than I do up travel. I don't care. And other people can.
Nothing looks sicker than like a slammed truck on 35.
Hell yeah.
I want my truck I want the body to be as low to the tires as possible.
But here's the deal, James. I got 37s now, and my fender arches are only going to be what?
Like a
5
few inches, 5 or 6
5 inches at the most away from the top of my tire.
God, that's so hot.
So rolling down the street, it's just
squatty.
super squatted and low. But then when we go off roading, it's just going to drop
just
out.
drops.
And I
all
may
the way
be
into
shitting the bed on
everything.
this, right? And I might go out off roading and be not happy with it. But I don't think I'm going to be. I think I'm going to be happy with
I think
it.
that's the way.
No, dude, you're milking it for sure.
At the end of the day, though, all it takes is different springs to get it up a little bit higher, or just crank those springs and give them some.
Yeah, we can change it
down.
later.
Like,
I just want to go for ideally what I'm looking for as far as the way it looks and the way it performs, and we'll see. We'll make a video of it. I think James has said we're going to try to make a video of the whole conversion and then going out and testing it. We'll put it on the RTI ramp and put it up against some of our other customers' Jeeps that
long
have
arm,
fully built
coilover.
systems. We'll see how it works. We'll see how it
Be
works.
interesting.
They will. And the other thing, I think one of the other big deals, right, is that on a TJ you have a shorter rear drive shaft, where your LJ has a really long drive shaft, so we don't really have to worry about like getting into a weird predicament where your slip yoke, or not your slip yoke eliminated, but your like plunger on your drive shaft comes out of play. Like all that weird stuff, I feel like is less of a case on an LJ.
How often is that coming into play? How often do the short wheelbase crowd run into problems with drooping out past their?
Well, on the two-door Jeeps, it's a big problem. On the TJs, that's why everybody who's got a TJ uses a slip yoke eliminator, and that solves a lot of the problem.
Got it.
Because your drive shaft itself is extending, it's not coming out of the transmission. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Which
You got a little double cardine up there now, and then the drive shaft itself plunges.
Yes. If you David actually has a video on what a slip yoke eliminator
There you go.
does.
Go look that up on YouTube.
What
Go
it
look
is
at it.
specifically, because it's one of those words that I, for the longest time, used because I thought I knew what it was, and I was wrong.
Or SYE, as everyone calls it on the interwebs.
Yeah, well, just learn how to type.
Abbreviation.
Acronyms.
Abbreviation. So anyway, it's really cool to dive into it. I'm excited to actually have it like legitimately burned in and functioning and on its own weight. But the other thing that we're running into is when you have a coilover. So this is a 2.0 coilover, which means the body itself is 2 inches, but you're having a 2.5 inch spring. Which is the ID. So your OD of that spring is actually three or 3 1/4 inches.
Something like that. 3
Or
1/4.
no, 3.5, I think.
3 1/2. Yeah.
So now you have 3.5 inches of spring sitting in between your frame and your tire. So the issue that we're running into is his wheels, which he's committed to because they're nice OMF beadlocks. You can't just change the offset of your wheel without like going to a spacer, let's say, right? Which I don't think there's anything wrong with the spacer. Tons of people run them, as long as they don't like seize on there, and I think everything's good if you don't
I
do
think
that.
proper maintenance on them and
So
installations.
I
that's the
talked
issue
crap
that
on
we're-
spacers for a really long time. I'm still not a huge fan, but I realize that as long as you're not being ridiculous, usually people get in trouble with spacers when they're looking for the stands, right?
Yeah.
So-
it's all about the stand.
When
So
they
I-
want the stands.
I think that there's something to be said for spacers on an IFS versus spacers on a solid axle as well, right? Because there's this the center of the force of that tire has with the spacer is now moved out, right?
Yes.
Which then puts excessive force on the bearings, the ball joints, all those parts get a little bit more force than they would if there was no spacer.
More leverage,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the math, right?
Yeah,
And
So-
and also scrub radius gets
So-
pretty out of
that's
hand.
true.
Correct. So, I've ran them in the past on my Jeep successfully. I've seen them on a lot of other Jeeps. I'm gonna have to run them on this one because, like Jake said, I've got my OMFs on there, and I'm so deep into this project, I'm not willing to purchase new wheels at this time. So I'm gonna space them out, and I'm gonna run what I have with spacers. It's not to say that down the road I won't eventually switch them out to the proper wheel size, but wheel size is an issue. So when you're going to do this project and you've got this piece of paper with all your costs on it, coils and coilovers and Fox shocks and all the other ins and outs that go with it, you should really consider that you're probably going to have to buy new wheels too.
The unexpected expenses.
Yeah.
Going back to that.
Yeah, odds are you don't have the right wheels for outboard coilover for your Jeep. You're going to have
Yeah.
to buy different wheels.
There was one more thing too that we ran into is that, like, talking about packaging everything in the right spot, right? Well, on a stock TJ or LJ Dana 44 in the rear, the brake lines literally run right where you have to cut off all the brackets and weld the lower shock mounts to. So now, guess what? You either have to go buy new hard lines and reroute hard lines, or you do what we did, which was get steel braided lines and run steel braided lines all the way from where it mounts to the axle all the way out to the wheel
But
cylinders. or
You don't think
caliper.
when you're doing a coilover swap, you're gonna have to do new brake lines, but guess what, everybody?
Guess what? You gotta do it.
Yeah.
Well, did you say about the e-brake too?
Oh, so the e-brake too. So
So
That was
so
another
so,
thing.
so did
That's
you tell them
another
about
big
the
thing.
flip, right? So the caliper is at the back, right? It's on the back side of the axle. We have to flip it to the front side of the axle to make room for the coilover to mount. You're doing that, which means the e-brake isn't going to work. So you've got to buy. No big deal because there's Mr. Blaine at what is it, Black Magic Brakes, and Mr. Blaine has all these things you need to flip that, and it's bolt in. It's super simple. It's bitchin'. We also bought his big brake upgrade kit for the front of my Jeep. So now we basically have, Ram 1500 brakes up front. So it's not a issue. It's not something you have to figure out because Mr. Blaine's already figured it out. So on a TJ, it's
God
super
bless
simple.
these people.
Yeah.
This
so,
dude did the outboard shock kit in like what 97 he said was his first one, which
Well-
the Jeep came out in, or I think he said 98 and the TJs came out in 97.
yeah. So he's been doing it a long time. So he had a lot of good information for us. But yeah, there's all that stuff, right? Calipers had to be flipped. Big brake kit up front.
Which you use every bit of real estate that those calipers being flipped to the front side of the
Every
axle,
piece.
because you're taking the whole backing plate off, right? And you're flipping it from your driver's side to your passenger side to driver's side. So now all of a sudden your caliper's out of the way, but you use every bit of that real estate, especially with the coilover. I think if you went with a regular shock, which is a lot skinnier, obviously, you probably wouldn't run into these issues. I'd say you can get away with it if you didn't have a coilover to like mount that thing wherever you want with the caliper still back there. But with a coilover, it just takes up way too much real estate,
Just got to take your time and make sure everything's going to fit before you weld it all in.
Yeah.
As
Get-
with anything.
Get a good welder. Make sure
You
you
guys
got
are
a good
so
welder.
fucking smart.
Yeah,
We just
totally are.
We do know the questions to ask.
That's,
That's
why.
why they pay us the big bucks.
That's why I'm glad, even with Jake doing all this math and you guys doing the same stuff with your Jeep, David. I mean, yeah, we want to SAS our stuff, and I want to do it like myself, but I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, it's because you looked at your phone in the middle of
I was told to look at my phone.
God. No,
But yeah,
Oh.
I want to do it, and
it's the
I
things
want
you
to.
gotta go jack. If you want to solid axle swap your car, go jack up the front of it and stare at it for an hour.
yeah. I mean,
But
we
even like, okay, so I'm helping around here, and even doing things myself in a garage or with my friends most of my life is 100% different. I come to learn. I hang out here a lot, right? But the things that you guys have
much, some
been
would say.
teaching me, well, you're fired. You're fucking fired. The things that you guys have been teaching me about attention to detail and not tricks to do things in like a sketch way, but to make them better, not only visually but operationally and mechanically.
Mostly just how to measure things.
It is
right?
completely fucking dumbfound me, honestly. And
Dude, it's just
Well-
taking time to do things, right? Like, and the other thing too is like you were saying, go look under your vehicle, like really stare at it and see what you
Grab
can
a
do.
picture of what you want and then go underneath your vehicle and look at what you have and just keep looking at the picture of what you want and looking at what you have and making notes going, oh, yep, that's not the same. That's not the
Yep.
same.
Yeah.
We all played those matching games when you grew up.
Dude, and
That's
the
what-
internet.
And
like,
every time you find something that's not the same, just go ahead and tack on anywhere from $200 to $500.
yeah.
Going
and like
back,
40 hours and 40 hours of time.
Yeah,
for that
and
one
at the
spot.
end of it, you should have a bill list that looks something like what? What'd you say, Jake? $3,500?
Oh, shut the fuck up. You never add it all up. I don't know. Yeah, an RV's worth, an F100's worth, and like years and years and years of buying and selling like the shittiest vehicles on the face of the earth to make
Yeah.
like $100 and being like, no, that was worth it.
well,
Hey,
going
you know.
back to what Kevin was talking about a minute ago, because he's been hanging out and helping around the shop. And I mean, I grew up working in my own garage, doing my own things, right? So I was a shade tree mechanic or whatever, and there was that way to do it.
They like to call me a shade tree mechanic like it's I would a badge of honor.
Because you work outside. Hopefully, there's a tree to work under, and you're not
that
in the
would
sun.
be super nice, wouldn't it? Or
You
in our
guys get to
case,
work in the alley all next
yeah,
week.
there's
Thanks
an
for
alley.
that comment.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do in your garage to get something done versus what we have to do here, because we're a business that's selling something that is better than what you can do in your garage, right? So Kevin,
Would
You
be
know,
worth
just
it if it wasn't.
something simple like, hey Kevin, can you please hook this wire up from this point to this point, right? And it's like, you don't just go grab a butt connector, right? That's not the way we do it. So there was a whole class yesterday with Kevin on how we do wiring, and it's going to be totally different than the way you would do wiring in your garage with your buddies, most likely.
Oh, it is.
So
I don't do the worst wiring myself. But when I came here, I learned how to wire properly.
I think that's the first thing I do when you guys start to come hang around. You got all four of you probably. The first thing I had you do is probably wire something, so
Yeah,
that you
dude.
realize like, oh shit, this is gonna be different.
Oh wait, working on cars isn't fun.
Yeah,
Dude,
it's,
no,
I
it-
don't want to do this anymore.
See, I thought it was better because it actually makes me realize not how much I've fucked up in the past, but how much cleaner it could have been very easily.
yeah.
You know, and the cost of material for those things, if you keep fucking up, obviously that adds up. But you're not making like $100 decision. It's 50 cents here, 10 cents here, but the outcome of it looks like it was a very expensive job.
Well,
Yeah.
those
But
heat,
the simplicity is key.
those heat wrapped soldering. That's so hard.
Shoulder sleeve.
Soldering.
Those
The
things
hard
are
word
such
for me to say.
cheating. Like they're
Oh,
cool.
I
Definitely the
love
cheater way.
those. God, those are great.
Yeah, there's some cool tricks.
They're better than the pinchy blue boys that I've used since I was 13.
Yeah,
And
there's
in all
AutoZone
honesty, too,
special.
I pinch this, and I'm like, why it no work? I'm like, because you know pinch very good.
Because you bought a 50 pack for $4.99 at
Exactly.
O'Reilly. You
Yeah.
know, like maybe that's why. I don't know.
Because you were crushing it with like a screwdriver
You get a hammer
instead
and a
of
screwdriver.
actually
I had
using
to
a
do it.
crimping tool.
I had to do it with some like actual cutting tools one time, and every single time you're like, oh god, it's not tight enough to
and
like
nope.
make it tight, but then you go a little bit further and it just cuts it
It
right.
cuts it
in half.
right in
You're like,
half.
oh, there we go. Time
Yeah.
for another one.
Sick.
Oh, hey, there's some butt connectors. There's some blue butt connectors out there that are probably still in a car that are running perfect.
Yeah,
no,
that's
100%.
true.
And
But I'm just not. I don't take that risk being a business owner. I'm going to do it better.
Yeah,
and
100%.
and there's probably, I mean, you go from like the shade tree mechanic to the next step up would be what we do, right? Where we try and heat shrink everything, and it's got loom on it. And, you know, you do your best to make it look good, but then there's like mil spec, where
Which
it's
we,
like,
we do mil spec too, but we rarely find anybody who's willing to pay the price.
because
Yeah.
it's so much more intense than doing, you know,
Yes.
like just your regular wiring job that we do, where you're looming it and stuff like that. It is like way precise.
Yeah, wiring's one of those things where it is definitely you have to ask the customer what their budget is, and then if the budget isn't high enough to even get it to our level, then we won't do it at all. But it has to at least get to our first stage of
Tier 1.
wiring. Of I don't want your car to catch on fire. I'm sorry.
So it's going to be expensive.
So it's going to be expensive.
In closing, if you are thinking about solid axle swapping your car, don't just buy a dirt bike. Just buy a dirt bike.
That's the truth.
Or here's a wacky idea: buy
Stop it.
something that already has a solid axle in it.
Why
Yeah.
don't you just already buy a solid axle?
I mean, I know they sell them.
Here's
I have
another
one.
idea.
Maybe like a 2001 Jeep TJ special.
There's one for
edition.
sale. Only 1,800 in that color.
Just
New
keep,
motor,
Shameless
new used
plug.
motor.
Brand
Just
new motor.
keep enjoying your IFS car and how nicely it drives on the road, everybody. Like, why
Yeah.
why not this fantastic little...
Kevin's
number.
truck does drive pretty nice
My truck drives great.
when the wheels stay on it.
Uh,
It's
yeah,
also-
that was
it's
the big
also a
thing.
newer Tacoma,
When the wheels
you know.
don't fall.
So
Yeah.
not only with that, you guys, what did we do? We did the
No, Kevin, this is in closing.
in closing, we'll talk about it
It-
next time.
In closing, what we did
It's
was
his first
we're
podcast.
closing.
It's his first podcast, everybody.
We're closing.
I know
but I'm
he's-
closer to the microphone. Am I
Okay,
not supposed to touch it?
bye.
So next
you hear my
time
tongue?
we will talk about King of the Hammers and how we're going to help out the Team Stearns this year again, and what we learned from last year. And we're also going to tell you about all the crap we're going to find trying to put coilovers in the front of my Jeep, because I'm sure we're going to find more
dude, I
problems.
Yeah, I'm
with
gonna
it.
open this back up real quick. So what we're gonna do here is close this. All right, go ahead, David.
This has been the Bent
Bye.
Motorsports Podcast. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Bent Motorsports. Stay updated on the latest happenings, future projects, videos, events here at the shop. Remember, guys, at Bent Motorsports, if it's in stock, we've got it.